OHA is not the end-all and be-all of every problem that we have. This is important to recognize. There are things that OHA can do and should focus on and do with excellence. And I want to mention what that is with regard to the rail. With regard to the rail, absolutely, OHA should have no position whatsoever. And here's why. OHA needs to recognize that we do have institutions that deal with issues such as rail. We've got the governor, we've got the State Department of Transportation, we have the legislature, we have the city council, we have the neighborhood boards. Rail is properly an issue for them to deal with, and voters need to hold those institutions accountable. Here's what happens when you get OHA involved in that. You have an agency that happens to be one of the fastest growing financial entities in the state. It went from a cash-only basis to a trust that has land, which is also gobbling up and acquiring lowly valued properties such as the Gentry Pacific Design Center they bought last month and so forth. They're increasing their portfolio. They will be tempted to use the power and wealth that they have to make arrangements and deals with developers as well as financial financiers if you bring them into the contracting issues of rail. No, but that's not their business. OHA can give us something that the other departments of government cannot. OHA can give us what is truly Hawaiian in this process. What's missing from the conflicts about rail? Whether you are for rail or against rail, what is missing is a table at which to sit down and practice ho'oponopono with our enemies as well as our colleagues and our friends. The Hawaiian way is to practice reconciliation, not after the fact, not after we find iwi of our kupuna, but before we find them. The problem that cost H3 so much and is already costing rail is that we are in an adversarial mode, which is good for the finances of those of you who are going to be lawyers. That's good. But as lawyers, you're also mediators, and you also serve the common good. OHA has the wonderful opportunity, by not being political in the sense that other organizations are, to create a table at which we bring developers and environmentalists, Hawaiians and non-Hawaiians, military and civilian, and we practice the bringing together of stakeholders, and we deal with issues and come up with solutions. OHA should be the leader of this practice. This is the sense of the common good. For those of you who study law, you know Plato wrote about this in his Republic. And those of us who are, all of us, legislators, need to say, let's do politics this way. The Hawaiian value system, which OHA should represent, is a wonderful way in which we can bring peace and harmony, ho'oponopono, where the rest of the world only has conflict. Integrated ahupua'a. And what that simply means is this. Instead of singling out Hawaiians in a region, such as on the Lainai coast, where I lived for many, many years, from Makaha all the way down to Nanakuli, and giving benefits to Hawaiians only, after 30 years, we don't see much progress. Let's take the entire region and integrate it, develop the economic, educational, other types of social resources that are necessary for all people. As the water level of all boats, regardless of their racial background, rises, the water level of the Hawaiian people will rise. You see, we can't raise the quality of life of Hawaiian people unless we improve the entire system. I call this integrated ahupua'a planning. Another measure would be the Stender Plan, is what I call this. It's a plan by which OHA can take much of its vast wealth and subcontract to Hawaii's very fine private schools the education of young people. It only takes about $20,000 to $25,000 a year. The interest on the Kaka'ako lands could certainly fund the education of up to 100,000 young people in places like St. Louis, Iolani, Kamehameha, Punahou, and so forth. If the funds were provided, the private sector would be expertise at this, and we would be able to meet a need without having to invent another system, and the economic competition with the public school system would actually improve the public schools. But let me close with this, and I want to talk about it a little more later on in answer to another question. I would say that we must work very hard to repeal many of the negative aspects of Act 195, known as the Native Hawaiian Royal Commission Act. I am absolutely for the recognition of Hawaiians as other Native Americans, the Indians and Alaskans, the original intent of the Akaka Bill. But the Akaka Bill failed because it had a portion in it up until this year which no congressman would take back to his home, which stated that we will establish a nation within the United States based on blood litmus test. You may not have read it, but Act 195 says that the only members of the Hawaiian nation would be those who can prove that they had Hawaiian blood, and a 5-member commission would also take those who prove that they have blood and determine whether they are culturally Hawaiian. There's no statutory rule as to what that means. I may be rejected because I have a Western degree called a PhD. If this were the case, tens of thousands of Hawaiian citizens in 1893, Hawaiian, Chinese, Japanese, and Caucasian, would be stripped of their citizenship if that were the standard. Because it is very un-Hawaiian and because it harms the public good, my #1 legislative concern will be the repeal of the negative aspects of the Native Hawaiian Roll Commission Act. Thank you.